The dog sat in the far corner of the shelter yard every single day. He stayed close to the metal fence where the ground was rough and cold. His fur was dark and thick, but it had lost its shine over time. His body was strong yet always tense, as if he expected pain to arrive without warning. The shelter workers had given him the name Shadow because he moved quietly and stayed unseen. For 3 years Shadow had lived there without once looking into a human face. People tried everything to reach him. Some spoke softly and some spoke with cheer. Others brought treats and toys and sat patiently nearby. Shadow never reacted in a way that gave them hope. He did not bark or growl. He did not wag his tail or step forward. He simply lowered his head and turned his eyes away from everyone. If someone came too close, he shifted his body just enough to keep distance. His silence was not angry but guarded and heavy. The shelter itself was a busy place filled with sounds. Dogs barked from nearby runs and doors opened and closed all day. Volunteers walked back and forth with bowls and leashes. Yet Shadow existed apart from it all, as if wrapped in his own quiet world. Marta was one of the workers who noticed him most. She arrived early every morning to clean the yard. She spoke to Shadow while she worked even though he never answered her. She talked about the weather and about her bus ride and about small moments from her day. Shadow listened without lifting his head and without turning his eyes. No one knew much about his past. The papers said he was found near an old bus stop during winter. He had been thin and cold and alone when he arrived. There were marks on his body that suggested rough treatment long ago. The shelter had healed his body, but his mind stayed closed. Families often paused when they reached his pen. They noticed how calm he was compared to the others. Some thought his silence meant gentleness. Others sensed something broken and walked away. Children were usually drawn to puppies and playful dogs instead. Shadow watched all of this from the corner of his eyes. He learned the pattern of footsteps and voices. He learned when food would come and when the lights would go out. He learned how to survive without being noticed. Looking at people no longer felt necessary to him. One afternoon a woman arrived with her young son. The boy's name was Leo and he was 7 years old. He had soft brown hair and eyes that stayed curious and calm. He held his mother's hand as they walked through the shelter. Unlike most children, he did not rush toward the barking dogs. Leo stopped often and looked carefully at each animal. He noticed small details like how one dog leaned against the wall or how another paced in circles. When they reached Shadow's pen, Leo slowed even more. He saw the dog sitting alone in the corner. He noticed how Shadow did not look up at all. The mother spoke with a volunteer nearby. Leo quietly stepped closer to the fence. He did not call out or wave his hands. He did not knock on the metal bars. He simply stood there and watched. Shadow sensed someone near him. His ears shifted slightly and his muscles tightened. He waited for the usual sounds of excitement or disappointment. None came. The silence felt different this time. Leo stayed where he was. He did not ask his mother to adopt the dog. He did not ask why the dog was alone. He only observed with a steady calm that felt unusual for a child his age. After a while his mother called him back. Leo left without saying a word to Shadow. Shadow remained in the corner long after they were gone. That evening Marta noticed something strange. Shadow was not facing the wall as tightly as before. His body angle had shifted just a little toward the fence. The next week Leo returned. Again he walked calmly beside his mother. Again he paused at Shadow's pen. Again he stood quietly without trying to get attention. Shadow felt the familiar presence and listened. This time Leo sat down on the ground near the fence. He crossed his legs and rested his hands on his knees. He breathed slowly and stayed still. The world around them continued to move and make noise. Shadow remained silent but aware. Days turned into weeks and Leo kept coming back. Sometimes he stayed for minutes and sometimes longer. He never spoke to Shadow. He never tried to touch him. He simply shared the space. Shadow began to expect him. He noticed the sound of Leo's footsteps. He noticed the calm rhythm of the boy's breathing. His body still stayed tense, but something inside softened slightly. The corner no longer felt like the only safe place. One afternoon the sky darkened and rain began to fall. Leo arrived holding a small umbrella. Water tapped gently against the concrete ground. The sound made Shadow flinch for a moment. Then he settled again. Leo crouched near the fence and leaned forward just a little. His voice was quiet and careful. He whispered one single word. The word was soft and full of meaning. Shadow froze where he sat. For the first time in 3 years his head lifted slightly. Not enough to see the boy fully, but enough to show that something had reached him. The yard felt still in that moment. And nothing would be the same again. After that rainy afternoon Shadow did not return fully to the corner anymore. He still kept distance, but his body no longer pressed against the fence like before. The shelter workers noticed the change almost immediately. It was small but real, and it gave them quiet hope. Marta watched him closely during the following days. She saw how his ears turned more often toward the yard entrance. She noticed how his head lifted slightly when footsteps passed. Shadow was listening more than before. Leo continued to visit every week. Sometimes he came with his mother and sometimes with both parents. No matter who came with him, Leo always went first to Shadow's pen. His movements stayed slow and careful. He did not rush even when the other dogs barked loudly. He did not react to the noise or the excitement around him. His attention stayed focused on the quiet dog in the corner. Shadow sensed that calm and responded in his own way. During one visit Leo brought a small book with him. He sat near the fence and opened it on his lap. He began to read quietly, but not loudly enough to draw attention. His voice flowed gently like a steady stream. Shadow listened. He did not understand the words, but he felt the tone. It was soft and even and carried no pressure. The sound did not demand anything from him. As the days passed, Shadow started sitting closer to the fence. Not touching it, but no longer hiding from it. He chose spots where he could hear Leo better. Sometimes his tail moved slightly without him noticing. The shelter workers made sure no one disturbed these moments. They asked others to keep distance when Leo was present. They understood that something fragile was forming. Something that could easily break if rushed. One afternoon Marta placed a bowl of food closer to the fence than usual. Shadow hesitated for a long time before moving. His eyes stayed low and his body stiff. Then slowly he stepped forward and ate. It was the first time he had done that with people nearby. Marta stayed still and did not speak. Leo watched quietly from the ground. The moment passed without fear. Shadow remembered things from long ago. Hands that moved too fast. Voices that were sharp and loud. Places where looking up meant trouble. Those memories had taught him to survive by avoiding eyes. They had taught him silence and distance. The shelter had given him safety but not trust. Trust needed something else. Leo never tried to break Shadow's space. He did not reach through the fence. He did not call Shadow's name loudly. He waited and allowed things to happen naturally. During one visit Leo whispered the same word again. The word that had stopped Shadow on the rainy day. He said it once and then stayed quiet. Shadow lifted his head slightly more this time. His eyes still avoided direct contact. But they no longer turned fully away. They rested near the boy's shoes. The distance between them felt smaller. Weeks went by and the routine continued. Leo arrived and sat near the fence. Shadow shifted closer each time. The corner of the pen slowly lost its meaning. Other visitors noticed the difference. They saw Shadow walking more freely inside the pen. They saw how he watched the gate with interest. Some even asked about him. The volunteers spoke softly about the boy. They explained how patience had opened something deep. They warned others not to interfere. Shadow was still fragile. One morning Shadow surprised everyone. When Marta arrived, he was already sitting near the fence. His body faced outward instead of inward. His posture looked uncertain but open. Marta felt tears in her eyes but stayed calm. She continued her work without drawing attention. Shadow watched her movements carefully. Fear did not control him as tightly as before. That afternoon Leo arrived earlier than usual. Shadow noticed immediately. His ears lifted and his head followed the sound. The shelter yard felt quiet again. Leo approached the fence and sat down. He placed his hands on the ground and waited. Shadow stood up slowly. His legs shook slightly as he moved. He walked toward the fence step by step. Each step felt like a decision. Each movement challenged years of habit. The space between them closed. Shadow stopped just short of the fence. His chest rose and fell quickly. Leo stayed still and calm. No one spoke. For a long moment Shadow stood there. Then he sat down near the fence. Closer than ever before. Close enough to feel the boy's presence clearly. Leo whispered the word again. Shadow lifted his head fully this time. His eyes met the boy's face briefly. It lasted only a second. But that second carried years of pain and waiting. Shadow did not turn away immediately. He held the gaze and then lowered his head gently. The connection was made. The shelter workers watched from a distance. No one moved or spoke. They understood they were witnessing something rare. A wall was breaking without force. Shadow had not changed suddenly. He was still quiet and cautious. But the door inside him was open now. And he was no longer alone in his world. The moment Shadow looked into Leo's eyes did not fade after that day. Something inside the dog had shifted and it could not return to how it was before. He began waiting near the fence long before Leo arrived. His body still held tension, but his mind was slowly opening. Each visit became a little different from the last. Shadow no longer stayed silent inside himself. He listened more closely to sounds around him. He reacted with small movements that showed awareness. Marta noticed how Shadow followed her with his eyes now. Not directly at first, but close enough to show interest. She spoke to him in the same calm voice she always used. This time he did not turn his head away. Other dogs barked loudly when visitors passed. Shadow stayed quiet but alert. He watched people walk by and studied their movements. Fear still lived inside him, but it was losing its control. Leo continued his routine without changing anything. He understood something important without being told. Shadow needed time more than anything else. So Leo gave it freely. Sometimes Leo brought small things from home. A soft cloth that smelled like clean laundry. A leaf he found on the ground outside. He placed them near the fence and left them there. Shadow approached these objects slowly. He sniffed them carefully and stepped back. Nothing bad happened when he did. This taught him another quiet lesson. During one visit, the shelter felt unusually crowded. Many people had come that day. The noise level was higher than normal. Shadow felt his body tighten again. He moved back toward the corner instinctively. Old habits returned easily when fear rose. Leo noticed immediately. He stayed seated and calm. Leo whispered the word again. The same word that had first reached Shadow. It cut through the noise like a soft signal. Shadow paused where he was. He did not move forward or backward. He simply stood still and listened. The sound grounded him in the moment. The corner lost its pull. Shadow turned his body slightly toward the fence. It was not a full step, but it mattered. Leo remained quiet and still. Trust continued to build without pressure. As days passed, Shadow began accepting food from closer distances. Marta placed bowls nearer to the fence gradually. Shadow hesitated but ate every time. Nothing bad followed these moments. The shelter workers began talking about Shadow again. Not with pity but with hope. They spoke about potential homes carefully. They knew he needed someone patient. Leo's parents noticed the bond forming. They watched how their son interacted. They saw how calm Shadow became around him. They began to consider something serious. During one visit, Leo's father stood quietly behind him. He observed Shadow closely. He saw the way the dog watched Leo's every move. He understood this was not a coincidence. Shadow began sitting directly at the fence now. Not pressed against it, but close. His body language showed caution mixed with curiosity. His eyes lifted more often. One afternoon, Leo reached his hand toward the fence slowly. He stopped before touching it. He waited to see how Shadow would respond. Shadow froze for a moment. His breathing became faster. Old fear tried to take control again. Leo did not move closer. He pulled his hand back gently. That choice mattered. Shadow watched the hand retreat. Nothing was forced upon him. The tension eased slightly. Later that same day, Shadow surprised everyone again. He moved his nose toward the fence on his own. He sniffed the air near where Leo had been sitting. His tail moved once then stopped. Leo smiled softly but said nothing. He knew this moment belonged to Shadow. The shelter workers felt the weight of the change. Years of silence were slowly breaking. One evening after closing time, Marta stayed a little longer. She sat near Shadow's pen quietly. Shadow approached her closer than ever before. He stood beside the fence without hiding. Marta did not reach out. She simply stayed present. Shadow looked at her briefly. Then he sat down calmly. That night, Marta cried quietly in her car. She knew Shadow was healing. Not quickly and not easily, but truly. Leo's visits became the highlight of Shadow's days. He recognized the sound of the family car. He stood up when he heard it. His body responded before his mind could stop it. During one visit, Leo sat closer than usual. The fence separated them but barely. Shadow lowered his head near the ground. His ears stayed forward. Leo whispered the word again. Shadow lifted his head and held the gaze longer this time. The fear in his eyes was softer now. Something warmer replaced it. The shelter yard felt quiet and still. Time seemed to slow around them. No one dared interrupt. This was a turning point. Shadow had not forgotten his past. The memories still lived inside him. But they no longer ruled every moment. He was learning that safety could last. By the end of that week, the shelter made a decision. They would allow Shadow to spend supervised time outside the pen. Only with people he trusted. Leo would be part of that moment. The gate to Shadow's pen stood closed for now. But something far more important had opened. Shadow was ready to take another step. And the next one would change everything. Morning light filled the clinic room and softened the hard night. Maria sat quietly with the puppy still resting in her arms. The world outside slowly woke up while she stayed still. She felt like time had paused just for them. The puppy lifted its head and looked around the room. Its eyes searched for something familiar. When it did not find it, the puppy grew still. Maria gently held it closer. She spoke in a calm and warm voice. Her words were slow and reassuring. She wanted the puppy to feel safe. The puppy listened and leaned into her touch. Clinic staff returned with gentle smiles. They moved quietly and spoke with care. They respected the bond that had formed overnight. Maria thanked them for everything they had done. The puppy was given food and clean water. It ate slowly but with clear hunger. Each small bite felt like a step forward. Maria watched closely with a soft smile. After eating, the puppy seemed stronger. Its tail moved slightly for the first time. Its eyes looked brighter in the morning light. Maria felt a quiet sense of relief. A staff member spoke with Maria about next steps. They explained care and recovery in simple terms. The puppy would need patience and kindness. Maria listened with full attention. She signed papers with steady hands. The choice felt natural and clear. She was not ready to leave the puppy behind. Her heart had already decided. When Maria stood to leave the clinic, the puppy followed her step. It stayed close to her leg without fear. It trusted her completely now. That trust felt deep and meaningful. Outside, the air felt fresh and cool. The street looked different in the daylight. Maria carried the puppy carefully to her car. The puppy rested calmly against her arm. The drive home was quiet and peaceful. The puppy watched the passing buildings with curiosity. It no longer looked scared. It seemed ready to begin again. At home, Maria prepared a warm space. She placed a soft blanket on the floor. The puppy stepped onto it slowly. It circled once and lay down. Maria sat nearby and watched quietly. She did not rush or crowd the puppy. She wanted it to feel in control. The puppy soon relaxed completely. Days passed and the puppy grew stronger. It learned the sounds of the house. It followed Maria from room to room. It never wanted to be far from her. Maria named the puppy Hope. The name felt right and true. Hope followed her during quiet mornings. Hope waited by the door every evening. Neighbors noticed the change in Maria. They saw her smile more often. They saw Hope walking proudly beside her. The story spread quietly through the street. Maria returned to work but always came home early. Hope waited patiently each time. The moment the door opened, Hope ran forward. That joy filled the house with warmth. At night, Hope slept close by. It rested peacefully without fear. The past no longer haunted its sleep. Maria watched over it with care. Sometimes Maria remembered the alley. She remembered the bravery of a small puppy. She remembered loyalty stronger than fear. Those memories stayed with her always. Hope continued to grow and heal. Its tail wagged freely now. Its eyes shone with trust and love. It had found a home. Maria often thought about how one moment changed everything. A simple patrol had become a turning point. A small life had asked for help. She had answered that call. Together they walked forward into each new day. The pain of the past slowly faded. What remained was connection and care. Hope and Maria had saved each other.